UnCanadian by Be Constant Unspoken, I felt cheated. That dark part of me whispered what I didn't want to admit. The only part of James that ever got results was his dick. That's what put me in this situation. His safety line, his insurance, just in case he needed to reel me back to shore. Just in case I dared to toss him back into the sea with the rest of the fish. The worst part? I couldn't decide if I hated him more for it or if I hated myself for letting him. Casey, stop holding back. No more lying to yourself, no more swallowing them down, this is poison. What's the point of pretending? He never cared enough to notice, let alone listen. Hey, you fucking asshole! Do you hear me? I'm talking to you, you useless piece of shit! Turn your fucking head! Look at me! Look at me! Each word ripped out of me, leaving me trembling and raw. Act like you're not some broken little parasite! For once in your goddamn life, listen to me, listen! You worthless joke, you waste of space. You talentless, gutless, pathetic sack of shit. I could hear the words tearing from my throat, each one louder, harsher, more vicious than the last. Before I even knew what was happening, it burst free, unstoppable. My voice cracked, trembling with fury, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The sound didn't even feel like mine anymore. It was raw, primal, feral, and as much as I wanted to deny it, it terrified me. Oh God, did I do it again? Did I say what the voice told me to say? No, I couldn't have. I had it under control, didn't I? Had I said that out loud? Sometimes my thoughts slipped out before I even realized. How much had I said? I couldn't remember. The last few seconds were a blur, wiped clean like someone had taken an eraser to my brain. I shifted in place, uneasy, my mind turning against me, betraying me with thoughts I didn't want to believe were mine. How could I even trust myself anymore? I felt so small, like I could disappear if I tried hard enough. Beethoven stopped. Why did he stop playing? How long had he stopped playing? Did he hear that? Did I say it out loud? What had I done? The silence hit me like a slap. It was louder than anything I'd ever heard. A 50-car pileup, metal folding like tinfoil, horns blaring, screeching, tearing through my skull. Chaos. Waves crashing down, motorcycles roaring in the wind tunnels downtown. Deafening, but nothing compared to the sound of my wrist. The crack, sharp, brutal, final. It echoed in my head before the pain could even register. A grinding twist of bone, a twig snapping underfoot. Over and over it replayed in my mind like a song stuck on repeat. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, turned my head, swallowed the pain. I couldn't let him see it, not the hurt, not the tears threatening to spill. If I did, it would be worse. Then his eyes widened. That look, the soft, guilty one, the tears welling up in his eyes, his voice trembling like he was the victim, like I was the one who'd wounded him. This was the man I loved. How could I be so cruel to him? Was I turning into a monster? James spoke as if casting an incantation. I swear, you make me like this, you don't know what you do to me. My broken wrist was proof, not of his violence, but of my power over him. This was my fault. I did this to the man I loved. I fell for it every single time. I reached for him, cradling his face in my hands as if my own body hadn't just betrayed me. My voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I forced myself to breathe as he turned to look at me. The silence stretched out thick and deliberate. James's playing. It drove me insane, but it also kept me sane. The piano was his refuge, his obsession. As long as the notes filled the air, I knew where he was. I knew he was too consumed with the music to notice me, to lash out. The longer he played, pouring himself into those keys, the better his mood would be when he finally stopped. I needed that. I needed him to play. But when the music stopped, when the piano fell silent, it was worse. I hated the sound of him ignoring me, but I hated the silence even more. That silence was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet, it was pointed, heavy, as if he stopped playing just to remind me he could. My heart pounded as I stood in the stillness, exposed, raw. The absence of sound gnawed at me. I'd wanted him to stop, to listen to me for once, to remember our appointment. But now all I wanted was for him to play again. I regretted ever interrupting him. That awful grating sound, it kept everything in. Without it, my mind was unraveling, and there he was, looming over me. Even sitting on his piano bench, he felt enormous, like he could swallow me whole with a single look. Those eyes, wide and watery, full of hurt, like a little boy who'd lost his mother. How could you say that? What did I ever do to deserve that? How could you be so mean to me? Those eyes asked the question over and over, begged and accused all at once. Don't I know how sensitive he is? How much he cares? It crushed me, tore me up from the inside out. How could I be this terrible person, the kind who could hurt someone they love so much? He was my life, my everything. And here I was, an abuser, hurting him. What kind of monster does that? He stood up so quickly that the piano bench crashed to the floor, startling me. It felt as if he were afraid of me, like I was the danger and he needed to back away to protect himself. What? Are your hormones out of whack now? You going psycho on me? Is that your excuse? You think you can get away with this kind of abuse just because you're pregnant? You think I'm going to let you stand there and yell at me like that? After that verbal assault you just unleashed? I was doing nothing to you. Nothing. I was just sitting here playing the piano. I was innocent. No, that's not what I meant, I said, my voice breaking. I begged him to listen, to hear me out. But he wouldn't. I knew he wouldn't. He was already pulling away, retreating behind that invisible wall where everything was my fault, where I was always the villain. Go ahead, he shouted. You worked so hard to make this all about you, so say it, spit it out, or stop wasting my time. I opened my mouth, and all I could manage was, the prenatal appointment is in less than an hour. He looked at me, his expression screaming, why should I care? You promised you'd go with me, I said, hating how small and pitiful my voice sounded. I knew why he was like this. He was sulking because I had raised my voice earlier. That was all it took to set him off, to ruin this day for both of us. He was letting me know, in every possible way, that he wasn't here because he wanted to be. He was here against his will, and he resented every second of it. As the elevator doors opened, James stomped out, his size 13 boots hitting the floor like thunder. It wasn't just walking, it was a performance. The entire baby ward felt it. He entered like a man being dragged to his execution, towering over everyone, his massive frame drawing stares. The women in the waiting room, glowing and happy, their round bellies cradled in soft hands, fell silent the moment he entered. He didn't have to say a word. His presence alone made the room hold its breath. The way he carried himself, the scowl hardening his features, it reminded me of those silent, hulking killers in horror movies. It was absurd, but I couldn't blame them for staring. He seemed so out of place here, so angry. Every heavy stomp of his boots echoed through the ward as if he wanted everyone to know just how much he hated being here. The silence he left in his wake was suffocating. All eyes seemed to follow him, asking the same unspoken question, why is he even here? When we reached our room, James dropped into the chair with a loud, deliberate clunk. The cheap metal legs rattled like soda cans. Even the act of sitting down was a statement, a way to broadcast his displeasure. He stared straight ahead, not at me but through me, his eyes dead and accusing. And then, as if I needed the reminder, he whispered, his voice cold and sharp. You wanted me to be here. This was supposed to be a happy day. I wasn't going to let him ruin it. I told myself he didn't mean it, that this wasn't really him. He'd come around. He had to. This was our child. He was just pouting. I knew him. He was acting. He'd snap out of it. He had to. Behind me I felt a flicker of awareness, a tingling sensation that sent shivers down my spine. I turned to lock eyes with someone. Wait, it's you, witnessing as my chaos and pain unfolds. I feel you. Can you hear my desperation, my fear? I know you're still there. It's raw, isn't it? This darkness I've shared, the scars I've laid bare. You've seen me at my worst, and yet, here I am, still standing. So if you found some piece of yourself within my struggle, some reflection of your own fears, please, I plead with you. Like, share, subscribe. Please, will you join me?